The Unexplained Rundown is pleased to partner with tpublic.com and bring you some fun and fantastical apparel and accessories that are truly out of this world. If you're keen to support the show and see it grow, be sure to check out some of the cool designs in the merch store and grab yourself a bargain. Use the link in the description below.
Or concern you about the unknown and the unidentified flying object?
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report on.
Do you have anything on the subject, sir?
No, I haven't had anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on. The flying saucers, and we've had other things, you know.
For years, the world has seen reality distorted, facts manipulated, and truth hidden. But there's even more to the story than anyone has ever suspected, because no one has been able to see the whole picture until now.
Friends, welcome back to another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. My name is Grant Levac, and if you're new to the channel, if you found it intentionally, then like me, you're intrigued by the unexplained mysteries of this mortal coil of ours, and you crave to know what's real and what's not. Yeah, we've got a lot of stuff to cover off tonight, folks. So it's going to be a very interesting show. There's quite a few people in the live chat already, so do want to send a couple of shout outs to some folks in the room. Ross McLeod, welcome, my friend. Thank you for taking some time out of your evening, day, morning, wherever you are around this blue marble of ours. Scottish debunker, Scott, good to see you, my friend. Thanks for joining. Jasmine Shirok, welcome, my friend. Thank you for joining me for this episode this evening. Likewise with you, Jimmy. Always good to see you, my friend. And I would agree with you. Someone's been telling lies down under Indeed, and we're going to get into that this evening. Harry, welcome, my friend. Glad to see you. Looking forward to it. Colin from UAP Aotearoa has to jet early, but I appreciate you stopping by to say g'day. Looks like you're getting some delays there with your ombudsman appeal. We're working on it 8 months ago, so not too dissimilar from a lot of the FOIA requests and appeals that I go through. I get put in the rigmarole down here back home. Who else we have? We've got Mark McHiggins joining. Thank you for taking some time out of your evening to join. Chili Farm Brisbane, great to see you as well. Thank you. And geez, there's some other folks in the chat as well. We have Short Order Cook One. Welcome. Thanks for joining. Mark G, good to see you. Hello from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I believe this is your repeat appearance on the Unexplained Rundown. So thanks for joining. Take some time out of your again evening, morning to join. Quick shout out to Jasmine and Jimmy, my 2 Patreon members at the moment. If you are interested in supporting the channel above and beyond a like, share it, and subscribe, those certainly go a long way. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. But if you want to support the show above and beyond, like, share, subscribe, feel free to look at our Patreon page. There's a link in the description below. For as little as a couple dollars a month, you can support the show and help it grow. You can also join the channel on YouTube as well. There are YouTube memberships, so check those out if you wish. All right, let's get into it, friends. So we're going to jump into. We'll start off with the rundown. So obviously, the theme of this show is Australia caught in a lie on UAP. So for context, and I'm going to walk you through it quite comprehensively this evening, so those that may not have a frame of reference for what we're talking about tonight. In summary, back in July, the Australian Department of Defence made a broad brushstroke admission and said that with respect to the All-Domain Anomaly Resolutions Office's Five Eyes Forum on UAP, which it held in May of this year, the Australian Department of Defence came out and said that Australia did not attend a United States briefing on UAPs. fast forward to only a few days ago, and the Australian Department of Defence has now come out with a new admission saying that, yes, a defence representative at the Australian Embassy in Washington, D.C. attended the Five Eyes Forum. So why the complete 180 and what I would consider to be an outright lie? And we'll talk about reasons why for that in this evening's show. So let's kind of kick it off, and we'll just give a bit of context for those that maybe are not too sure what we're talking about with respect to the Five Eyes Forum. What has it got to do with Australia and so on? So here's a bit of a recap. This was Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the now former director of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, when he was attending a NASA public meeting with the UAP Independent Study Team, when he revealed this to the world.
We have time for one last question.
Sean, you recommended foreign partnership with NASA. I'm curious, especially given your map, have you, as AARO, partnered with international agencies, and is there ways for reporting to your?
So that's a great question. I want to expound on that just a little bit. So I have just held our first Five Eyes Forum on this subject last week, I think it was, or earlier this week. I don't know. Dan was there, and we have, we've entered into discussions with our partners on data sharing. How do they do reporting? What kind of analysis can they help us with? What kind of calibration can they help us with? What can we help them with? And we're establishing all of that right now. And they're going to end up, sending their information and data to us to feed into the process that we've laid out for how we're going to do all of this. Beyond that, I have not had either the time or the bandwidth to do, and that's why I would look to NASA to expand the scientific and academic relationships that they have across all of our allies and partners on how can we bring them into the fold. That's where I think there's a lot of benefit to NASA taking lead on that.
Great. Thank you. But one just clarifications for people who don't know, what are the Five Eyes?
Oh, I'm sorry. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Five Eyes, those are that's the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. So those are the 5 partners.
Terrific. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so that was on the 31st of May of this year. So the very next day, I decided to reach out to the Australian Department of Defence media team, which journalists often reach out to when they have questions. If they're reporting on defence-related news, they will reach out to the defence media team. So I reached out to, obviously I'm not an accredited journalist, but this was essentially, I won't read through the email in its entirety, but on the 1st of June, essentially the day after Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick made that revelation, I went so far as to summarize what Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick had said during that meeting. I even, for convenience for the media team, included links and basically information about the entire event. So if they wanted to watch the, if they just wanted to review some of the news that had been reported on the event, they could. So I asked this question, I've highlighted in bold. I said, considering the previous positions of and statements from the Royal Australian Air Force, Australian Department of Defence, and the Honourable Richard Marles, who's the Minister of Defence, as well as the Deputy Prime Minister, could you kindly provide comment on the Australian Department of Defence involvement / participation in the aforementioned Five Eyes Forum on Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, UAP, and confirm which defence services were represented at the forum? So I signed off as a citizen journalist, which I kind of consider myself to be. I'm reporting what I find to folks that are interested to learn about what Australia is and isn't doing about UAP. So that was submitted. I submitted that email to Defence Media on the 1st of June. Now, what do we know in the days shortly thereafter? So we know, thanks to the good reporting, from, let me just pull up the right screen so I've got it for you. Make sure I've got, so we know thanks to Brandy Vincent at, there we go, at Defense Scoop. So Defense Scoop, Brandy Vincent, who's done a lot of great reporting on this topic, a couple of weeks later, on the 15th of June, she reported on the Five Eyes forum on UAP, and she was actually able to speak to someone or connect with someone in defense. And I'll just pull up just a quick search here. So she was obviously trying to, like many of us were, trying to get some confirmation as to which member countries were represented. And so she reached out to the Australian Department of Defence, more than likely the media team. And she goes on to say in the article, meanwhile, a spokesperson from Australia did not confirm whether a representative from their nation attended the UAP meeting, and the response took a different direction entirely. So the response that she received to her inquiries, well, did Australia attend the Five Eyes Forum on UAP? The response that she got didn't even answer the question. The Australian Department of Defence does not have a protocol for reporting or recording of unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, or unidentified flying objects, the official told Defence Scoop in an email. So what I just read to you there, that's a carbon copy of the response that I received to my email that I submitted on the 1st of June. I received an email on the 12th of September. So I don't know why it took that long for defense media to come back to me. Again, maybe because they didn't recognize me as accredited journalist, but eventually they did respond, and it was just a boilerplate copy response. It was a non-answer. Didn't even bother to answer the question. So the frustrations kind of started there. So then let's fast forward to a couple of days thereafter, where Senator Whish-Wilson, so Senator Peter Whish-Wilson, who's the Greens senator for Tasmania, still the only Australian senator to date that has raised the issue of UAP in government, which, he's the only one that showed the courage and gumption to actually ask questions about, well, look at what our friends across the pond in the United States are doing. What's Australia doing about UAP? And he's been trying to press the Royal Australian Air Force, leadership in the Royal Australian Air Force, namely the Chief of Air Force, as to, well, is UAP that is something that, the Australian Department of Defence and Australian Defence Force should be concerned about. So, and he's been pressing, the former and current Chief of Air Force since 2021, since October of 2021, he's been continuing to press on this topic and press for answers. And so earlier this year, on the 20th of June, Senator Peter Whish-Wilson submitted some written questions, what are called questions on notice. So Senator Peter Whish-Wilson is a participating member for the Defence, Foreign Affairs and Trade portfolio and Senate estimates. And for those of you who don't know what a Senate estimates is, it's essentially an oversight hearing. There's a couple of hearings conducted a few times a year where essentially senators press folks in positions of leadership and authority in government to ensure that taxpayer dollars are being properly invested. They're not going to waste. Obviously, that the Australian public is getting a return on its investment. So they're scrutinising taxpayer dollars and scrutinising programs and initiatives that what essentially defence is doing with taxpayer money. So his question on the 20th of June, this is about 5 days after Brandy Vincent reported in Defence Scoop that Australia just gave a non-answer. His question directed to the Australian Department of Defence was, did Australia attend the recent Five Eyes meeting held in May 2023? If so, did it attend the briefing on UAPs? Now, slightly strange way of wording the question. I think it would have been simpler if he just came out and said, did Australia attend the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office's Five Eyes Forum on UAP held in May of this year? But he may have had a reason for framing it that way. The response that came back from the Australian Department of Defence about a month later, on the 19th of July, was a categoric, a broad brushstroke statement categorically saying Australia did not attend a United States briefing on UAPs. Now, in previous episodes of the Unexplained Rundown, and those of you that are here joining me and have seen those episodes, you'll know I've kind of raised some concerns about, well, is there potentially ambiguity in that statement? You know, is the Department of Defense speaking broadly on behalf of Australia, or whole of government, and Department of Defense, or are they speaking on behalf of the Department of Defense only? It's a bit. There's some clarification needed. You know, if that's not taken at its word. But if we do take it at its word that Australia did not attend a United States briefing on UAPs, well, that tells us that Australia wasn't at the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. And so I've, ever since this came out, obviously, or after Sean Kirkpatrick revealed that there was a Five Eyes Forum on UAP, I'd been trying to chase down clarification as to, well, was Australia represented? And if so, who represented Australia? So let's then look at move forward to another document. So that was on the 20th of June that the senator submitted those questions on notice, because there's more than one question. And so then let's just fast forward to really the day after Senator Whish-Wilson submitted those questions on notice. This was an email I submitted to the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Defence, Richard Marles. A little bit hard to see on screen, so my apologies there, folks. But I won't bore you with the whole email, but I'll essentially read the key question that I asked. And it was actually, I don't think I can highlight on screen. So question 3, I had a number of questions. Question 3 was reiterating for the Minister for Defence in a public meeting on the 31st of May 2023, the US All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick presented to members of a NASA independent study team on the issue of unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP, and stated the following. I've just held our first Five Eyes Forum, so basically the verbatim, that quote that Sean Kirkpatrick said in that video package you saw a second ago. So directly after that quote, I said, for your convenience and reference, a video recording of the statement is available via the following NASA video. And I even included a timestamp, so whoever is on the receiving end of this email, when they do exercise their due diligence, which you hope they would, I'm making it really easy for them to verify that information. So the question then I pose is, on consideration of the above statement made by Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, what was the extent of Australia's involvement in the Five Eyes Forum on UAP, and who from Australia was represented? Now, did you think I ever got a response to that? No deal. Have not received any responses that I have to that email that was directed to the Deputy Prime Minister and Richard Marles. Actually, that's a lie. There have now I'm catching myself in a lie. There have been previous emails, I should say, that I've submitted to Richard Marles that I haven't received a response to. This particular email, I actually did receive a response, so I'll show you what that response is. I'll just correct the record there. So let's have a look at, and we're kind of doing this in chronological order for you, so you've got a sense as to the time frames, the timelines, you know, how this all went down with yesterday's revelation that Australia did in fact attend the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. So let's now jump forward to the response that I received. So I submitted that email on the 21st of June, and to my surprise, a bit over a week later, I received a response, strangely from the Royal Australian Air Force, even though I had directed the email to the Minister of Defence. I received a response from the Royal Australian Air Force, more than likely because the Royal Australian Air Force has kind of taken lead on responding to general public queries on UAP. And I'm not the only one that's received these sorts of response letters with terrible graphic on screen that doesn't work well on this blue background. But this was the response that I received on the 30th of June, so a week and a half after I submitted that query to the Minister of Defence. The response came from the Air Commodore and the acting head of Air Force capability, a B. Sleeman. I believe that's Ben Sleeman. I'm not too sure on that, but a B. Sleeman. And the response was, Air Force did not attend the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. So you would assume, based on this response letter, that, well, perhaps they've done their due diligence and asked around within the Royal Australian Air Force to see, hey, did you guys know about this Five Eyes Forum on UAP? Was there anyone in Air Force that was in Washington, D.C. that either attended that event personally or if it was via video conference? But they just came back and said Air Force did not attend the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. Now, that wasn't the question that I asked. I said, my question was Australia represented at the Five Eyes Forum on UAP? And if so, who attended? So Air Force have just decided to own up on their front only and say, well, no, we can say that Air Force did not attend the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. So I took that response. I made an assumption that, okay, they've obviously exercised some due diligence to try and find out what they could about the Five Eyes Forum on UAP and come back to me in answering that question. So I didn't stop there. I thought, all right, well, I really want to get to the bottom of who from Australia was represented. Was Australia represented? If so, who was represented? So I reached out to the Australian Signals Directorate, who deal in signals intelligence across the Five Eyes, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, UK, and the United States, and pretty much a carbon copy email. I asked them specifically. I gave again a timestamp and a time code reference for the comments that Sean Kirkpatrick made at that NASA briefing. I said, considering the recent statement from the acting head of Air Force capability, so I included as an attachment in this email, which I haven't included, but I included that response letter that you just saw me pose a second ago, which said Air Force did not attend the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. So I said, considering that statement from the acting head of Air Force capability dated 30 June 2023, refer attached, that the Air Force did not attend the Five Eyes Forum on UAP, could you kindly confirm if the Australian Signals Directorate was represented at the Five Eyes Forum on unidentified anomalous phenomena? Now, I received a response, but they asked me, it wasn't for comment or background. So essentially just rest easy knowing that it was a non-answer. The question that I posed was not answered. So again, stones still needed overturning, and we were still no closer to getting to the bottom of, well, did Australia attend? Because we know from Defence Scoop's reporting and the reporting from Daniel Otis, and Brandy Vincent, that obviously the United States was there because it was led by AARO. We know that Canada attended. The Canadian Armed Forces were in attendance. They were represented. And we know through Defence Scoop's reporting that New Zealand was represented, the New Zealand Defence Force. But Australia and the UK were completely mum. They weren't talking whatsoever until obviously the 19th of July, when the Australian Department of Defence comes back and says Australia did not attend a United States briefing on UAPs. So what do we then fast forward to? Let's have a look at another document. So I was trying to really track down as many leads as I could. So I submitted a Freedom of Information request, Freedom of Information Act request, initially on the 1st of June, so the day after Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick made these revelations at the NASA meeting. I then had to, it was received on the 8th of June, and the request was, I kindly request copies of Australian Department of Defence emails, including supporting file attachments, meeting agendas, attendee lists, meeting documents, briefing documents, talking points, reports, assessments, and slide deck presentations pertaining to the Five Eyes Forum on Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, UAP, facilitated by Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick of the US All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office in May 2023. As I expected, response came back on the 10th of July saying no documents were identified as falling within the scope of that request. And if we go down to the bottom of the FOIA response from a Catherine Burke, document searches were conducted by personnel within SP&I think that's strategy, policy, and industry, using search terms specific to the request, including but not limited to Five Eyes Forum, US All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, Unexplained Anomalous Phenomena, UAP, and Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. No records were found matching the scope of the request. Now, again, that was back on the 1st of June. I didn't specify a date range in that request, so we can make an assumption that the records that they searched was from the 1st of June through to potentially the date that I received this response back, which was on the 10th of July. So no deal, no cigar on that one. So persevere and continue, we did. So we then move on to a follow-up. I had sent an email to, this is an email to the Deputy Prime Minister's Media Department, so DPM Media. This was on the, when was this? This was on the 11th of September, because I wasn't getting anything from my queries with other service groups and agencies. And, I thought, well, okay, now I'm going to ask some questions pertaining to the response that the Australian Department of Defence gave Senator Whish-Wilson, which was Australia did not attend the United States briefing on UAPs. So these were the questions that I asked. Did the Australian Department of Defence receive an invitation from the US All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, to attend the inaugural Five Eyes Forum on UAP back in May 2023? If yes, why did the Australian Department of Defence decide that Australia, a Five Eyes member country, not attend AARO's Five Eyes Forum meeting / briefing on UAP to better understand the potential national security threats and safety of flight risks that UAP pose, when only back in February 2023, Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Robert Chipman publicly stated that RAF, Royal Australian Air Force, sought information and a briefing from the US via the air attaché in Washington, D.C. on the shoot-down of the Chinese spy balloon and 3 unidentified aerial objects to better understand their source, identity, and any learnings from the United States response. That's important because the Royal Australian Air Force is quite happy to request information from the US and seek a briefing on the shoot-down of the Chinese spy balloon and those 3 unidentified aerial objects, because the Pentagon stated that they represented a clear and present threat to national security with respect to the Chinese spy balloon, as well as safety of flight. That's why they shot them down. But RAF will not seek a briefing or information on UAP, which represent exactly the same threat, national security threat and safety of flight risk. So I've never had an adequate response or any response to that query. My third question, if the Australian Department of Defence did not receive an invitation to attend AARO's Five Eyes Forum meeting briefing on UAP, is the Australian Department of Defence admission that Australia did not attend the United States briefing on UAPs represented, let me say that again. Is the Australian Department of Defence admission that Australia did not attend a United States briefing on UAP representative of non-attendance by the Australian Department of Defence only, or the Australian government more broadly? So I'm trying to get clarification as to, well, is there ambiguity in their statement? Again, no response. I've had no response to that query. So no luck on that one. So again, we persevere and we continue on. And I know there are some questions that have come through, so I'm going to come to those as we go through. So that was on the 11th of September that I submitted that email. Never got a response. I submitted another Freedom of Information Act request. This was one that I had submitted. When did I submit it? On the 8th of October, I submitted a FOIA request requesting copies of emails, including supporting file attachments sent from, to, or cross-copied to personnel assigned to the Air and Space Attaché, Washington, D.C., for the period 1 April 2023 to 30 June 2023, inclusive, that contain any of the following keywords: FVEYS meeting, that's the acronym for Five Eyes, the keyword Five Eyes, FVEY singular, FVEYS, plural, forum, and Five Eyes Forum. Now, the reason I submitted this request with those specific keywords is I had success with a US FOIA request. I requested for emails for the NASA, Dan Evans, who was one of the NASA leads for the UAP independent study team. And the response that I got back from NASA was that Mark McInerney was, who we now know is NASA's UAP, the director of UAP research. He also attended the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. So, taking the success that I had from this NASA request, FOIA request, I thought I'd try my luck with the same keywords with the Air and Space Attaché in Washington, D.C. But no luck, no cigar on that one as well. So trying to cover as many bases as possible to at least get something from the Australian Department of Defence on your potential attendance or non-attendance to the Five Eyes Forum. So then let's fast forward to later that month. That response, that was the 8th of October that I submitted that FOIA request. That no records response came back on the 9th of November. But fast forward a couple of weeks after the 8th of October, so to the 22nd of October, where we get one of, by far, I would say the most serious toned article by the Australian media to date on UAP. And so this was an article that many of you are probably familiar with. I was involved in actually helping get this story out. The journalist Jamison Murphy had reached out to me. I provided some contextual information and background info on Australia's lack of engagement on the UAP topic, and the fact that we had a stunning admission back from Defence saying that Australia did not attend the United States briefing on UAP. So Jamison, who also collaborated and I guess sought commentary from Ross Coulthart in this article, both Ross and I are quoted frequently throughout the article. He came out with this bombshell article, and the fact that it's the Canberra Times, that's the leading paper in Australia's capital. So you'd think that there's a lot of people within government and defence that are going to read this paper, and it was a double page spread saying Australia ignores US Five Eyes UAP briefing as Defence Force mocks UFOs. And that's true. There's been FOIA documents that I've shown and provided to Jamison that clearly indicate that folks in positions of leadership within the Australian Department of Defence are clearly just taking the piss out of the topic. They're treating it like an absolute joke. So that article came out on the 22nd of October. So what happened shortly thereafter? So let's now try and, actually, I'll just pull up my slide deck again so you can see. And apologies, folks, if this is a little bit boring for those that are kind of up to speed, but I do want to provide some comprehensive context for everything leading up to this. A little hard to see, but I had some engagement prior to the 2nd of November when I submitted this email. I submitted an email to Susan Gough, the Pentagon's spokesperson on UAP, highlighting that, well, Australia's saying it didn't attend the Five Eyes Forum. Why did then Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick characterize the forum as a Five Eyes engagement when clearly, according to Australia, we know of only 3 of the Five Eyes that attended, the US, Canada, and New Zealand. Now, do you think I got a response to that email? Well, surprisingly, I did. But the response was what I expected from Susan Gough. Grant, I don't have anything for you beyond Dr. Kirkpatrick's remarks that he made during that NASA public hearing. I refer you to each Five Eye partner regarding their attendance at the forum. AARO is committed to working with our allies and partners in an open, sharing environment to identify and resolve UAP sightings. What's so frustrating about this is a colleague of mine, a girl that's doing some wonderful work engaging her elected representatives and trying to submit FOIA requests, or what's called Official Information Act requests in New Zealand. She got a response from the I think the Air Commodore in New Zealand, or the New Zealand Defence Force, saying New Zealand is not prepared to comment further on its attendance at Five Eyes Forum on UAP. Please engage the US for more information. So you're getting the runaround. You got Susan Gough saying, "I'll go back to your home country and ask questions," and then New Zealand is saying, "Well, go ask the US." So it's a complete cluster basically on trying to get any clarity out of both the Australian Department of Defence, the Pentagon, as well as the New Zealand Defence Force for those that are, and obviously Christopher Sharp's trying to get some commentary from the UK as well, but nothing to date. So no luck with that correspondence with Susan Gough, and her response there was on, you can see, was on the 9th of November. So then let's move forward again. So we now come to where are we at? This is where we're currently at. So the 15th of December, only a few days ago. Now, the response to Senator Whish-Wilson's follow-up questions on notice that he submitted, you can see on the 2nd of November, he submitted a number of follow-up questions because he, like I, was not satisfied with the Australian Department of Defence's response that Australia did not attend the United States briefing on UAPs. So he submitted, and I helped draft the questions that Senator Whish-Wilson's office submitted on the 2nd of November. The responses, these questions were answered on the 15th of December and published only yesterday. So this is brand spanking new. So the questions that there are two questions on notice documents. This was questions notice references 168. There's another one, 169, which I'll cover in just a moment. So the question, and this was, you'll notice this question probably sounds familiar because it's the question that I had submitted and posed to the Minister for Defence. Did the Australian Department of Defence receive an invitation from the US All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, to attend the inaugural Five Eyes Forum on UAP in May 2023, led by AARO Director Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick? If yes, for what reason did the Australian Department of Defence decide that Australia, as a Five Eyes member, not attend AARO's Five Eyes Forum on UAP? Who has final decision on attendance? How many Five Eyes Forums meetings has Australia not attended in the last 5 years? So I, like Senator Whish-Wilson, like Jamison Murphy, the journalist, are working on the assumption that what the Australian Department of Defence is telling us is factual, that Australia did not attend the United States briefing, being the Five Eyes Forum on UAP, briefing on UAPs. So the response, which we all now know, which I broke yesterday, yes, a defence representative at the Australian Embassy in Washington attended. So a WTF moment. What the hell? A complete 180 from what they had publicly stated on the 19th of July. And now on the 15th of December, several months later, they're completely retracting and, well, not retracting, they're doing an about face and saying, yes, defense was represented. So why the outright lie or lie by omission? Why did you not come forward with this information when a sitting Australian senator requested it on the 20th of June? Why did you not answer the question truthfully and factually and accurately back then on the 19th of July, and you're only coming clean in December? They go on to say Five Eyes forums, and this is their cover story, I believe, Five Eyes forums and meetings occur across a large number of agencies on a broad range of topics and at all levels. There is no centralized record of Five Eyes forums and meetings in which Australia participates. But I've just shown you comprehensively the level of attempted engagement I've had between defense media, the Minister for Defence, the Deputy Prime Minister's media team, the Australian Signals Directorate. I got a response from the Royal Australian Air Force saying that it did not attend the Five Eyes Forum. So, and we've got all these FOIA requests that have been submitted pertaining to the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. So how can they say that, oh, well, we don't know anything about the Five Eyes Forums, it covers such a large number of agencies? They're trying to play semantics card here and say that, oh, well, we're not privy to all that information. As Ross Coulthart always says, always suspect a stuff up before a conspiracy. Well, I think they're trying to come forward and say, oh, kind of hint at there's a stuff up on their end because they're not privy to all this information across all these agencies. Well, if that's the case, what level of confidence does a sitting Australian senator have that when he asks questions of those that are in positions of leadership in defence and government in a Senate estimates hearing or in a written follow-up questions on notice, what degree of confidence does a sitting senator have that their questions are going to be responded truthfully, factually, and accurately? I would say very little now based on this complete omission and lie by omission or outright lie that, they're doing this about face. So it's incredibly frustrating. The other, and we'll talk more about this in just a moment. And I do want to come to all of your questions as well. So let's just have a look at the other questions that were submitted. This is document 169. Additional. I don't know why it was broken up into two different questions on notice documents, but regardless, it was. So again, submitted by Senator Whish-Wilson's office on the 2nd of November. The questions were, and again, I helped draft these questions, some of them. So the background information for the Australian Department of Defence was as follows. On 26 June 2021, an Australian Defence spokesperson, so we're going back, this is the day after the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released its preliminary assessment on UAP. An Australian Defence spokesperson was quoted in an ABC News article stating, Defence does not have a protocol that covers recording or reporting of unidentified aerial phenomena, unidentified flying object sightings. On 16 September 2023, the Daily Telegraph reported the following. Australia's defence position was in response to written parliamentary questions last month as to whether it would follow the US Director of National Intelligence's intelligence in January to establish an all-domain anomaly resolution office to coordinate sightings. The quote being, Defence has no plans to replicate a similar mechanism. So Defence has no plans to replicate a similar investigatory body to that of AARO. A handling note from RAF Chief Air Marshal Robert Chipman confirmed. The Defence Aviation Safety Authority and Civil Aviation Safety Authority, DASA and CASA, already serve this function. So these are the responses. Already serve this function across flight safety issues, and apparatuses exist for concerns regarding national security. So that as background information, the Senator asked the following questions. What protocol exists within the Defence Aviation Safety Authority, which I've covered extensively in previous episodes, for the recording or reporting of unidentified anomalous phenomena UAP, otherwise similarly identified as unidentified aerial phenomena or unidentified flying objects? Question 2, if there was no protocol in 2021, when was a protocol introduced if the Defence Aviation Safety Authority now serves this function? So again, we're just going off what Defence has said earlier, that they have the ability to serve this function, capturing reports of UAP. Third question, what is the definition of / criteria for flight safety issues for the Defence Aviation Safety Authority? And 4, if not accounted as flight safety issues, how are spoofing, i.e. false GPS, radar tracks, radar signals, spoofing incidents monitored and recorded or expected to be monitored and recorded if there have been no reported incidents? And the context there is the Australian Department of Defence, to a previous question on a notice, responded to Senator Whish-Wilson and said there have been no reports of unidentified aircraft in Australian airspace for the last 20 years. So that's the context. Now, I have some serious doubts if that statement is factual, because they're saying that, DASA has, the ability to, what did it say was the quote? It said, already serves this function. So you're telling me that there has been no reports of an unidentified area in the last 20 years? The answer is the Defence Aviation Safety Authority, DASA, does not have a specific protocol concerning the reporting of UAP. All right, well, go into a little bit more detail for us, because you really haven't answered the question. What protocols exist for the recording and reporting of UAP, because you've already said that it already serves some sort of function that can capture UAP-related incidents. So short, standard response. And that's what's frustrating with a lot of these questions on notice responses. They're almost not evasive, but they're almost just so short and sweet to the point. You'll never get information volunteered in any queries that you submit to Defence Media, DPM Media, the Australian Deputy Prime Minister, Australian Prime Minister. You'll just get these very short, succinct, to the point responses. They won't volunteer any information that will further support your inquiry. A flight safety issue might comprise an incident, malfunction, defect, technical defect, or exceedance of limitations that endangers or could endanger the safe operation of an aircraft. Well, I've gone through in great detail in previous videos how the Defence Aviation Safety Regulation has, which are the protocols, the procedures that need to be followed in order for the Defence Aviation Safety Authority, for the Act, the legislation to be completed, to be performed. I've done some extensive commentary in previous episodes saying that the only mechanism that exists within the Defence Aviation Safety Regulation is submission of an occurrence report. So if an aviator, a RAF pilot has a near miss, they're obligated to report that. If they observe an unidentified aircraft, they don't have to report it unless it becomes a safety of flight issue. Well, a UAP could become a safety of flight issue, irrespective of whether you just observe it 10 miles off to your left or your right or in front of you. What's to say that it's not going to potentially become a safety of flight issue? I mean, look what we know of the Nimitz incident of 2004. David Fravor and co. Looking down at a Tic Tac, and then boom, safety of flight issue. There's a near miss, and then it's presumably 60 miles off its cap point, and that's questionable. But that's another story for another day. The third answer was spoofing incidents are not recorded unless determined to be an aviation safety occurrence. So those responses are probably less important to what we're discussing, obviously, this evening. But I just wanted to show you what those were for context on the other questions that were asked. So let's now jump on forward to where are we here? There we go. So this was a Freedom of Information Act request that I submitted on the 27th of September. And again, I'm trying to do this in chronological order of when these queries and requests were submitted. So 27th of September, I submitted a FOIA request I requested copies of Australian Department of Defence produced emails and written correspondence that relate to and support the determination made by the Australian Department of Defence that Australia did not attend the United States briefing on UAP. And I put it in quotes because that was a direct quote from their response. They identified one document as falling within the scope of that request. And if we come on down, where is it? I don't know if it's, they usually, if there's no records pertaining to falling within the scope of the rest identified, they'll usually tell you which agencies they conducted searches through. But that's the key thing to take into account there. There was one document that was identified. Now, the response that I received, that was submitted on the 27th of September. I received a response only 2 days ago on the 18th of December. So this was a couple of days after those questions on notice were answered by the Australian Department of Defence. So remember Senator Whish-Wilson's questions on notice that he submitted on the 2nd of November. They were just answered on the 15th of December, published yesterday on the 19th. But I received this FOIA request on the 18th, and just haven't really had a decent look at it until today. So it kind of lines up nicely with what I'm going to show you now. So let me pull up the document. So it was an email, a single email, an email with an email response. 20th of June, 2:43 in the afternoon. So this is the same day that Senator Whish-Wilson submitted his questions on notice. Did Australia attend the Five Eyes Forum on UAP? And the response was, we know Australia did not attend. Or the question was, did Australia attend the Five Eyes Forum held in May? If so, did Australia attend a US briefing on UAPs? So this email kind of shows us the deliberations that were taking place behind the scenes, pertaining, emails pertaining to, how did defense come to that determination that Australia did not attend the United States briefing on UAPs? So this was the email that I received. So there was an email sent on the 20th of June to the SPNI, the Strategy, Policy and Industry Ministerial and Parliamentary Team. Cross-copied in was the Royal Australian Air Force MLO, Ministerial Liaisons Office. And the email was, "Good afternoon, team. Thank you so much for your time on the phone just now." So obviously discussed, had to talk about the Senator's question. As discussed, appreciate your assistance in answering the below question on notice from Senator Whish-Wilson on 20 June 2023. Did Australia attend the recent Five Eyes meeting held in May 2023? If so, did it attend the US briefing on UAPs? Appreciate your input by 2 p.m. The next day, 21 June. Now, why they're requesting a response the following day, I'm not sure, because the question was not answered until a month later on the 19th of July. So there's a gap between the 20th of June to the 19th of July. So this was sent from the Deputy Director of the Ministerial Liaison Office for RAF. So the response the following day, Wednesday, the 21st of June at 10:55 in the morning. Good morning, someone's redacted to protect the privacy of the individual. Apologies for the delay. I have spoken with our divisions, meaning I suspect they have made phone calls, which means that information is typically not readily available through FOIA unless those calls are recorded. I have spoken as opposed to corresponded in writing. I've spoken with our divisions and they are unable to provide input. They are not aware of this meeting and briefing. They're not aware of the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. Sorry, we couldn't assist you more. So one would think that, all right, well, maybe that's just, considering that defense media has received multiple inquiries from multiple parties, myself and Brandy Vincent, asking, did Australia attend the Five Eyes Forum on UAP? Would you not think to engage maybe defense media, if the media has an interest, being that UAP is of significant public interest, that maybe defense media is getting some queries on this? Or maybe that the Royal Australian Air Force MLO is receiving other FOIA requests pertaining to the Five Eyes Forum on UAP? Would you just leave your attempts to source information on Australia's attendance to Five Eyes Forum, would you leave it at that? So why is there only one email? Why is there no record of other documents across other departments within defense? Now, I have no idea what these divisions are, and I suspect Senator Whish-Wilson is going to have some relatively pointed questions for defense at the next Senate estimates in February. But this still doesn't, really show us anything. It means that good on them for trying to do their due diligence and find out, did Australia attend a Five Eyes briefing on UAP? But this individual saying, oh, I wasn't aware of it. Well, that doesn't mean it didn't happen. So who did, the fact that the RAF Ministerial Liaison Office hasn't got an answer to this question, are you going to just take that and say, oh, no, Australia didn't attend the United States briefing on UAPs? Or are you going to get off your ass and exercise your due diligence and maybe reach out to defense media, maybe reach out to DPM media, maybe reach out to look at what FOIA requests have been submitted to defense, specifically targeting, we know we got a response from, the Royal Australian Air Force responded to my inquiry to the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Defence, saying Air Force did not attend the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. Remember, that response came back on the 30th of June, 10 days after that one. So RAF MLO, Deputy Director, did you bother to have a conversation with B. Sleeman, the Air Commodore and acting head of Air Force capability? Because obviously they were aware of the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. They categorically came back and said that Air Force didn't attend it. So why are you not, why is there nothing more than just this single email exchange, to demonstrate your due diligence, or I would say complete, it's lacking due diligence if there's only just one bit of correspondence that's gone back and forth. So that makes me seriously question, well, again, what degree of confidence can Australian taxpayers and sitting Australian senators have that FOIA requests, as well as questions on notice that are submitted to those in defence, are going to be acted on with the appropriate degree of due diligence? We've clearly established that there is a lack of due diligence being exercised by those within Department of Defence to get to the bottom of these questions that are being asked. They're not doing their homework to answer a senator's questions and answer FOIA requests. And I'll tell you exactly why. So this email, again, 20th of June, has the keyword in there, UAP. So why is that important? So let's now, and this is to really demonstrate, I believe, the what I call the catastrophic incompetence. We know of catastrophic disclosure, but catastrophic incompetence through these various departments that are responding to questions on notice, and even those that are responsible for conducting FOIA searches for FOIA requests. And so why do I say that? So let me show up, go back to our slide. Let me just pull up. So this was only posted to X, Twitter, when was it? Yesterday, by my good friend Roger Stankovic. He submitted a FOIA request in September. So he, I suppose you call it tweeted still, the FOI request I sent in September 2023 resulted in no documents found or received when cross-matching two keywords, UAP and Five Eyes. I think I want an explanation why the DoD FOI office refused my request based on this new information. So it's a bit hard to see. So let me show you what Roger's FOI request was. Let me just make sure I've got the right one here. Here we go. So this was Roger's request. And sorry, it's a little bit pixelated because it was an image that Roger had provided in his tweet. So on the 8th of September, he initially submitted a request, and then he was asked to basically, I suspect he was asked to revise it. And so on 8th September, the applicant submitted a request under the FOI Act to Defence in the following terms. I request all documents from the department, being the Australian Department of Defence, that include the keyword Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, bracket UAP. So that would suggest, search, one of the keywords you should search for is UAP. Unusual area sightings, UAS, or any other such acronym, UAP outside of bracket, without brackets, without parentheses, or any other acronym that may be used by the department that refer to an unidentified flying object, UFO, between the date range for his search was January of this year to September 8th of this year. And so this response that he received was basically saying, where is it? Let me go to page, it's on page 2. Let me pull up page 2 for you here. Here we go. So from 12 onwards, searches for documents falling within the scope of the revised request, so it was a revised request, were undertaken of relevant databases by the Royal Australian Air Force, RAAF, Ministerial Liaison Office. So remember, RAF MLO, the email I just saw or showed you before, and the Defense Aviation Safety Authority. DASA and RAF MLO have both advised that searchers return no documents falling within the scope of the revised request. Well, I'm sorry, but why did Roger's request why was this email not located? Because it falls exactly within the scope of his request. This email was June. Roger requested the 1st of January through to the 8th of September, and he has in his request the keyword UAP. What do you see in the email? UAP. So why, again, this is just a classic example of where I think the FOIA team, they do great work, but unfortunately, they're not all exercising complete due diligence in processing these requests. And this is a classic example. Roger should have received that email, rather than a no records response to his request that he submitted. So I think Roger has a good case to answer here. He's got grounds to question the due diligence that was exercised by the FOIA team in processing his request. So is this intentional or unintentional? I have no evidence to say either way, but it's frustrating that we're trying to seek transparency from the Australian government and Department of Defence and hold them to account. How can we, when they're not processing requests and exercising their due diligence the way that we would expect them to do? We're paying them money as Australian taxpayers, and they can't even fulfill a freaking FOIA request and find documents that meets the scope, that matches the scope of the request. So that this kind of really frustrates me, and I've reached out to Roger, and I mentioned I'll share with him my comments that I've just shared with you all there. So Roger wasn't the only one that had taken upon himself to try and get some answers. My good friend, who I engage with every now and then on X or Twitter, Scott Manning, another Aussie, on the 7th of July, he submitted a FOIA request to the he actually submitted to the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet on the 7th of July, and he received a no records response. Now, it's quite conceivable that there may have been no records within the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. I suspect that's probably the case. So it's reasonable that he probably would have, I think it's acceptable, he probably received a no records response based on who he targeted that FOIA request to. But it was great to see that, I'm not the only one, and Roger's not the only one that's submitting these requests. There is a number of us out there, and I know that Jimmy submitted letters to his elected representatives, and the legacy news media, Clark Watson. There's many of us out there. It's not just me that's doing this. There are many of us that are taking upon ourselves to exercise our right to information and try and hold the government and Department of Defense to account and make them promote greater transparency. So what is a possible reason for why the Australian Department of Defence has now done an about face and saying, yes, a defence representative at the Australian Embassy in Washington attended the Five Eyes Forum on UAP, when back in July it said Australia did not attend the United States briefing? One, either there's some deception, there's some lying going on behind the scenes, or it's lie by omission, or it's catastrophic incompetence, or there is another option, which we also need to consider as well, which it could be, if I pull up our good friend Wikipedia, it could be just plausible deniability. Let me show that on screen there for you. I'll zoom on in so it's a bit easier. So what is plausible deniability? Plausible deniability is the ability of people, typically senior officials in a formal or informal chain of command, to deny knowledge of or responsibility for actions committed by or on behalf of members of their organizational hierarchy. They may do so because of a lack or absence of evidence that can confirm their participation, even if they were personally involved in or at least willfully ignorant of the actions. If illegal or otherwise disreputable and unpopular activities become public, high-ranking, and this is the key, high-ranking officials may deny any awareness of such acts to insulate themselves and shift the blame onto the agents who carried out the acts, as they are confident that their doubters will be unable to prove otherwise. The lack of evidence to the contrary ostensibly makes the denial plausible, credible, but sometimes it makes any accusations only unactionable. Now, this could be one of the reasons why Richard Marles has, I believe, not received a formal briefing on UAP to date. He's had, I believe, 6 engagements now with the US Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, in less than 2 years. And I've gone after meeting agendas, talking points, meeting documents on all of those engagements. And UAP, as I suspected, has not come up once in any of those meeting materials. Now, that's not to say that it could have been if UAP is an off-the-books discussion, if it's considered classified, then maybe there is redacted information that is pertaining to UAP. But why would there be classified conversations on UAP when the US government is being much more forthcoming and transparent on its approach to taking the topic seriously as a national security threat and safety of flight risk? This is the key one, though, on plausible deniability. And this is why I think plausible deniability plays a role in the Australian government and Australian Department of Defence's lack of inaction or lack of action and complete lack of interest on the topic. Flaws. Plausible deniability. It is an open door to the abuse of authority by requiring that the parties in question to be said to be able to have acted independently, which in the end is tantamount to giving them license to act independently. That's not so much the key one. This is the denials are sometimes seen as plausible, but sometimes seen through by both the media. So they're seen through by both the media and the populace. Plausible deniability increases the risk of this is the key one. Plausible deniability increases the risk of misunderstanding between senior officials and their employees. So is that what's going on as well? Is there a mix of plausible deniability along with deception, lying, straight out lying, or lying by omission, as well as incompetence? It could be a combination of all of those things. So hopefully that's kind of given you a comprehensive breakdown of what has led to the revelation yesterday that now Australia did attend the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. Obviously, I know I've been talking for quite a long time, so I do want to get to some of the questions that you guys have. So let me just come down to a few of them. I would agree with you, Scott. I would say it's a clear indication of misleading the Senate. Mark comments that they can't even keep their story straight, which is kind of true. Australia one knee deep in this, methinks. Quite possibly. I've always suspected that the Australian intelligence services, which are all exempt from FOIA, wouldn't you know, probably know a hell of a lot more about UAP than the Australian Defence Force services, the RAF, Navy, Army, Defence Space Command. Jimmy makes a comment. Someone will have to come out officially and make a comment on the situation, it would seem. Hopefully at some point. That's what we're pushing for. Thanks for your comment, Scott. Big thanks to you, Grant, for engaging with the Honourable Senator on this and providing him direction. And look, I'm just one person. I would encourage you to do the same. If this topic is important to you, and you want your elected representative, your MP or your senator to take this topic seriously, send them a snail mail, send them a letter, send them an email, tweet to them, give them a call. If you're consistent with your persistence, you may just strike gold and develop a relationship, an ongoing engagement with your MP or senator and help inform their thinking on the UAP topic, just like I've done with Senator Whish-Wilson. So if we can get more MPs and senators taking this topic seriously, it's a hard ask. And I was kind of fortunate that Senator Whish-Wilson had already developed an interest on this topic before I'd engaged him. So I kind of had a bit of a head start. But I would certainly implore you to engage your elected representatives if it's important to you. Because, you know, your MPs, your senators, you're their constituents. So what's important to you should be important to them. Thank you, Mark. Yes, hit that like button, guys, if you're finding this information interesting of value. Ross, yes, stonewalling again, shameless. Absolutely. Thank you, Jimmy. Do please hit that like button. Helps the algorithm gods, apparently. Mark's comments, a play of words, more likely some Aussie IC intelligence community went. Yeah, there is. And that's why I've always had that question in the back of my mind about the semantics behind, Australia versus, defense. But come on, the optics are it's pretty clear what the senator is asking. And considering he's submitted numerous questions on notice prior to the 2nd of November, dating back to the 27th of October in 2021, when he attended the first Senate estimates and pressed then Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Mel Hupfield. So I would say, don't play the dumb card, Australian Department of Defence. You know exactly what the question pertained to. And the response, in my opinion, was a blanket broad brushstroke admission that you were saying Australia didn't attend the Five Eyes Forum. And now when you kind of caught, you're caught red-handed, you're handing the cookie jar with these follow-up questions that you're being asked, in part, those that I've helped the senator draft, you're now coming clean. So I still think there is some deception going on. They were certainly dodging the question, 100%. Jimmy, who was the person who represented Australia in the Five Eyes Forum on UAPs? That, my friend, is a very good question. And I would love to know the answer to that one. I'm not going to say any more other than that. I'm still trying to corroborate information. I can only speculate because it's clear that the Australian Air and Space attaché, well, they probably didn't attend because I didn't get anything back on the FOIA request. So there was no correspondence among the Air and Space attaché pertaining to the Five Eyes Forum. But are there other representatives within defence within Australia that flew to the embassy, or someone that's based permanently in the embassy? Who is that individual? Who is the person that attended the Five Eyes Forum? I do want to see if we can get an answer on that one. I wonder if it was a sponsored role to attend. Someone else paid for the trip. Interesting. I honestly don't know. Stephen Greer, in his presentation the week before the Senate inquiry, even alerted to working with those in Australia. So there's more than one incident point in Australia. Yeah. Stephen Greer has publicly stated on 2 occasions in the last 12 months that he met and he briefed the Australian Minister for Defence more than a decade ago. Now, I tried to verify his claim, and I went after documentation, so correspondence between the Australian Department of Defence and Dr. Stephen Greer and his organisation, Serious Technologies, to support the claim of any correspondence between those two parties that would indicate some degree of engagement and maybe a briefing. I submitted FOIA requests on 4 of the last, going back more than 10 years, basically, I submitted FOIA requests for all of the defence ministers in that time frame. None and Buckley's got nothing. I personally think Stephen Greer is full of shit on that claim. That's just me, but I don't think he's being. I think he's trying to, increase his stature, so to speak, and saying that he's had all these briefings with people when, in fact, it might have just been an email that got sent, or and there was never a response. I don't know, but I personally think he's full of shit, because I can't verify the claim that he's made. And you think that Australia hasn't had any interest in the UFO topic publicly since 1996. You think then that there would be some form of documentation or record to verify some correspondence between those two parties. I don't think that Stephen Greer is full of shit on everything. I think he did a lot of good work back in, obviously, the National Press Club 2001 Disclosure Project, but I'm calling his bluff on his claims of engaging AUDOD. I don't believe it. Where's the terabytes of data Greer said he would upload for everyone? It's a very good question. Let's have a look. We'll see. I think we're coming to the last of the few comments. Mark McKeggers, nothing will happen here until the USA comes clean and the shoe drops there first. We might get the nod a year after that, but it'll be minimal. Yeah, I've heard that a number of times, and Ross, and certainly in the past, has been of that opinion that, well, kind of just waiting for the US to say you can get off the bench now and get in the game. But we kind of now are in the game, if you think about it. I mean, I've been thinking for so long that Australia was sitting on the sidelines, not engaging on this topic, but now we know that they clearly are. A defense representative based in Washington, D.C., attended the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. So I've submitted today a follow-up FOIA request for emails that supported or related to and supported the determination that the Department of Defense made that a defense representative from based at the Australian Embassy in DC attended the Five Eyes Forum. So I've gone after emails that prove how that determination was made, basically, for documentation. So watch this space. Kevin07, bring back the crud money. I remember that $700 was well spent. Ross, I appreciate all this background. Grant, all ears here. Thank you, my friend. Helen's comments, it's all a farce, just another form of a cover-up. Yeah, I mean, again, Ross's quote, always suspect a stuff up before a conspiracy, but I think it's a combination of the two. Do indeed, folks, smash that like button, guys, if you do want to see this channel grow. I don't know the answer to this one. 12CM32, lying to a senator has no penalty. I'm not too sure. I have to do a bit of homework, actually, to get to the bottom of that. Certainly agree with Scott, though. It should have a penalty. The senator lied to should have a warrant of arrest drawn. Well, again, I don't know what the legislation says, but I'm sure there is some form of penalty or follow-up for contravening the legislation. If an untruthful response has been provided to a senator, I'm sure there is something pertaining to that. Maybe an explanation as to why they were misrepresented the truth of the facts. Who knows? Someone, a defense representative of the Australian Embassy in Washington, D.C., that is where we are currently at. So we know that someone in defense at the Australian Embassy in Washington, D.C. attended the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. Get to work, Jimmy. Keep searching, my friend. I would love to see what you're able to come up with and find. If a paper trail exists, why no arrest warrants? Again, I don't know if what the extent of the penalties are, so I can't really comment on that one. FOIA is rubbish. I don't entirely. I feel your pain on that one. 12CM32. FOIA is challenging. There are challenges with FOIA. I don't think it's rubbish because FOIA can often help reveal breadcrumbs to a much larger bread loaf, and can lead to you submitting other FOIA requests that reveal bits of information that can then help inform engagement with your elected representative, your member of parliament, your senator. And again, a lot of the information that I've been able to provide Senator Whish-Wilson, I have been able to glean from FOIA, from questions on notice responses, from keeping my ears open and listening to what is being said, both within Australia during Senate estimates and obviously internationally as well. Many thanks, Short Order Cook One. You penned some excellent questions. I certainly try to keep the Senate apprised of what's been going on, because elected representatives, senators, members of parliament, they don't have the time, energy, the time to dedicate to researching this topic that we're all passionate about. So this is why I say there is really value in you engaging your MPs and senators. If you develop that relationship and engagement with them, you can really help inform their thinking on this topic and potentially inform their lines of inquiry that they will make within government and Department of Defense. Yep. Kind of agree. Calm down 12. This is Australia. It has. He's referencing a senator's questions contrasted with inquiries. That is true. Again, I think FOIA has tons of value, but it is not a panacea. It's not a one-stop shop. You can use FOIA in conjunction with other things like engaging your elected representatives, engaging the media as well, and so on. It is indeed frustrating. I agree with you indeed there, Jimmy. So that's pretty much most of the comments that have come through so far. So we might continue on. For those of you that want to stay on with me, I've got a few other things to talk and walk through in terms of what's been happening recently in Australia. I'll give you a rundown of a few things that have been happening close to home, and then obviously we can take any questions that you've got at the back end of the session. So those that have joined, we're just interested to learn about how we got to where we are now. How the rubber has met the road, so to speak. Feel free to say sayonara if you need exit, but otherwise, please feel free to stay with me. I'd love to be able to walk you through some things that have been happening closer to home. Harry, did you try to FOIA the SCIF visitor logbooks, Grant? Maybe that's why they suddenly decided to come clean. Good question, Harry. And yes, I did. So I have 2 pending US FOIA requests, one for the visitor registration records, the visitor registration logs with the Pentagon, because we know that the Five Eyes Forum on UAP was held at the Pentagon. And for anyone that visits the Pentagon, they require visitor access. They have to be sponsored by an agency within the Pentagon. So AARO, or presumably Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, or personnel within AARO would have had to sponsor the visitor registration records for those that visited the Pentagon and attended the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. How do we know that's true? Because that is revealed in the emails that I secured through FOIA when I went after Dan Evans, NASA, one of the NASA leads on the UAP independent study team. He was going back and forth saying in his emails that, I've submitted my visitor registration record. So that's information that we can FOIA. Now, it'll probably come back heavily redacted, so we might not be able to glean much from it. But I've gone after visitor registration records for Pentagon, as well as the SCIF, the Secure Compartmentalized Information Facility visitor log. So everyone that attends a SCIF, that enters a SCIF, their details are registered. So that is also FOIAable. Now, again, privacy information, will we get anything back from that? I don't know. But so there are 2 pending FOIA requests that I've currently got hoping to get responses on from the US. The challenge with the US FOIA is that the turnaround times are so incredibly slow. I've now been waiting for more than a year on some of my FOIA requests. And, we know from the good work that John Greenwald Jr. does that he's been waiting a number of years on some FOIA requests. So that's why, thankfully, the turnaround time for an Australian FOIA request is not as bad. They usually have a statutory deadline for response timeframe of 30 days. Usually it gets extended, gets pushed out. But thankfully, our turnaround times for FOIA in Australia is significantly better than that of the US. I think it's pretty much all the key questions that have come through. There've been some back and forth commentary with folks in the chat. Harry makes Oslo, AUSLO, Australian Liaison Officer Representative at partner agencies based in Washington. That might be an interesting tip. Thank you, Harry, for that little heads up. Thank you, Jimmy, for the quick plug. Yes, be sure to check out the merch store if you're just after some fun and creative apparel and accessories. Do check out the merch store. I only make pretty much $1 from every sale, but it does go into supporting the costs associated with running the show. Obviously, doing these live streams on StreamYard, and obviously file storage, Google Drive, and those sorts of things. They're all solutions that require some dollars. Short order Cook one. So I wonder if ASIO holds the information, or that there is some security restriction that has been placed on it. So that's what sucks about a lot of the intelligence agencies. ASIO, the Australian Signals Directorate, even though I inquired with their media team, or I went after their general inquiry line, typically you can't request documents, documents that are within ASIO, within the Australian Signals Directorate, within the geospatial, the NGA, National Geospatial Agency Organization, DIO, Defense Intelligence Organization, ASIS, ASIS, the Inspector General for the Intelligence Services, and I think you've also got now the Office of National Intelligence, the ONI as well. So none of that stuff is foreable, which is frustrating, because I suspect there is a lot of stuff within the intelligence agencies pertaining to UAP. Now, one of the things that is interesting to note, though, is that the National Archives of Australia, after I think it's 20 years, you can request for records through the National Archives of Australia through the various intelligence services. And I've done that on a number of occasions. In doing my research for the Westall incident, I requested records that were held by ASIO, Australian Signals Directorate, Defence Intelligence Agency, and one or two others pertaining to records that they may have had in their possession on Westall, on UAP, in more than 20 years ago. So obviously there's a window. I can't request for records from, we're in 2023. So I could request records through those intelligence agencies, through NAA, National Archives of Australia, from anything prior to the 20th of December 2003. But anything after that date, the 19th of December 2003, I can't request anything after that date, because those records fall within the 20-year window. But anything that's older than 20 years, you can request. So there's another tidbit, folks, for you if you are interested in chasing down records that you're interested to try and get your hands on, that you think might be in the holdings of the Australian Defence Force Services or the intelligence community services. Go for it through National Archives of Australia. Chili Farm, Brisbane, correct. NSA, this probably relates to a different comment. NSA, GCHQ, ASD, CSE, and GSCB are the true Five Eyes agencies, originally UK, USA, from Bletchley Park, where James Angleton worked during, that's from Harry, I should say. That was a response to Chili Farm's question. ASD was mentioned by John Ramirez, along with GCHQ in the UK, and that was Harry's response there for context. Thanks for your support, 12CM32. Appreciate it. Thank you as well, Erin, and thank you all for being respectful with your commentary. Harry, Australian Signals Directorate used to be called the Defence Signals Directorate prior to 2012. Yeah, so if you're requesting for records through National Archives of Australia, you can request for records held by Defence Signals Directorate, Australian Signals Directorate, formerly Defence Signals Directorate. And I've had one or two things come back through the National Archives of Australia. It's a bit of a hit and miss, because you really need to know what you're going after, and it's kind of like a bit of a needle in a haystack. But it's worth trying nonetheless. There can be fees associated if it's a significant number of records that come back. There can be some fees associated with it as well. Brent asked, do we know who the Aussie Mellon Elizondo Nolan equivalent are? Well, I mean, Ross Coulthart is the one that's leading the charge on, from a journalistic standpoint, investigative journalism, most of his stuff is obviously US centric, but he's certainly uncovered a lot of stuff in Australia as well, as have I, and I've collaborated with Ross on a number of times, a number of occasions. And there are also some great researchers within Australia as well. You know, you've got veteran researchers Keith Basterfield, Bill Chalker, Paul Dean. You've got Reddit user, you know, Harry is White Hot. I mean, man, does some incredible research on UAP in a historical context and its relationship association with nuclear testing in the 60s. You know, Bluegill, Triple Prime. I know Reddit user Harry is White Hot is really doing some great work on that front. Last comments, then we'll just we'll continue on with the rundown, folks. Australia plays a huge chunk in her book. The Grey Man is an Australian. I think Jimmy is referencing there Diana Pasolka's new book, Encounters. Haven't got a copy of it just yet, but I would love to know thoughts from those that have had an opportunity to read it. Aaron's question: is there a connection with UAPs and the AUKUS deal? It's a really good question. And, you know, we know that Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp were able to reveal, you know, that letter that the Canadian MP Larry Maguire submitted to the Defence Minister in Canada with concerns around their Five Eyes foreign material program. The FMP and the implications there potentially for AUKUS. Ross has raised this before that, you know, if it is true that the US has operated some clandestine crash retrieval and reverse engineering program for many decades, and they have been able to reverse engineer some exotic propulsion, and Australia is now about to spend $500 billion on some Virginia-class nuclear attack subs. You know, are we buying duds? Are we buying lemons? Are we spending $500 billion on technology that's going to be superseded by exotic propulsion that is living within these SAPs and WUSAPs and unacknowledged special access programs within the US? So you're very welcome, Harry. Always happy to give you a shout out, my friend. Jimmy concurs absolutely. Roscoe is doing some great work. Not Rosa, but Roscoe. And Daryl, thank you. Hello, Grant. We need a deep dive into Lockheed Martin Aerospace. I haven't. I've reached out to the media representative at Lockheed Martin, the United States. Didn't get a response, obviously, but I know Ross has talked repeatedly about Lockheed Martin. So there is Lockheed Martin Australia, and I'd be very interested to know what contracts the Australian Department of Defence has with Lockheed Martin. So that is certainly something I can explore down the road. So thank you for all of your comments, folks. Again, those of you that would like to stay with me, please feel free. I'm not too sure how long we will go through. We're going to continue on, but I do want to get on to some of the other content that I had prepared for you this evening, and that is giving you an update for those of you that aren't aware of it on the Australian UAP petition that I submitted to the House of Representatives back in June. So I, on the 1st of December, kind of a couple of weeks ago, received a formal response from the Australian Minister for Defence, Richard Marles, to that petition, and I wasn't expecting much. And for those of you that have seen the response, we didn't get much in response whatsoever. But let me show you on screen what that what that petition was, basically. Here we go. I'll just pull it up for you. Make sure I've got the right. So this was the petition that I had submitted on the 21st of June was the closing date. It ran for 20 days. I was extremely humbled and proud to stand alongside 758 other Aussies that took the time to sign this petition. And it was just wonderful to see the support that this petition received. So the response was received from the Minister for Defence, Richard Marles, on the 1st of December. And so for those of you that have not seen the response, let me show you. Let me highlight it for you. Here we go. Make sure I've got it on screen. Okay. So this was the response that I received. It was actually, the response was submitted to the chair of the Standing Committee on Petitions, and they then shared it with me. So the response from the Minister for Defence, Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles, to the chair on the Standing Committee for Petitions. Dear Chair, thank you for your correspondence of 1 August 2023 presenting petition EN 5115 Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena UAP. I have considered the matters raised in the petition. I note the petition requests the House conduct a formal review of UAP to consider to assess basically the national security threats and safety of flight risk that UAP pose. That was my request, that the Australian Department of Defence conduct a formal review of its long-held position on UAP, which is basically them saying, move along, folks, there's nothing to see here. That's the position they've held since 1996, when they ceased looking into UAP. UAP to consider the establishment of an investigatory body to assess the potential national security threats and safety flight risks that UAP pose. As acknowledged in the petition, Defence ceased handling reports of UAP in 1996 as there was no scientific or compelling reason to continue to devote resources to the recording and investigation of UAP. Defence does maintain robust safety and security reporting and management frameworks that are sufficiently flexible to capture UAP. Well, what the fuck are they? Because there's nothing in an occurrence report that is going to capture anything on UAP, because folks aren't required to report a near miss or an unidentified aircraft unless the sighting is repeated and it presents a safety of flight risk. So I would contest that the occurrence reporting is not intended for UAP reporting. There is still a high degree of stigma and ridicule that's associated with the reporting of UAP, and you'll see that in a video clip in just a while. So why would anyone that is in the Australian Defence Force feel comfortable and confident to come forward and report what a UAP, something they can't reconcile in the sky or in Australian airspace or in Australian waters for that matter, if they know that there's no reporting protocols in place? If they submit a report, where does it go? What happens to it? And why would they want to report it when there is clear and present stigma and ridicule that still plagues this topic and continues to plague it? And I've highlighted where stigma is alive and well in the Australian Department of Defence in previous episodes of the Unexplained Rundown. The Australian government is aware of the establishment of the United States All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, and Defence monitors AARO reports. There are no plans to replicate a similar mechanism. Interesting. All right. Well, who in Defence monitors AARO reports? And I submitted that as a query to the Defence media team, and they acknowledged receipt of my request. And that was a few weeks ago, and I'm still awaiting a response. Who in Defence, which service group or agency within Defence is responsible for monitoring AARO reports? That information shouldn't be classified, so hopefully you can come back with some information and be transparent with the Australian public. The government remains committed to aviation safety and national security. Should there be a compelling reason to believe existing reporting mechanisms are insufficient, the government would reconsider. Thank you again for forwarding the petition in 5115 for my consideration. Yours sincerely, Richard Marles. So we don't live in 1996. We live in 2023. I would say that is well overdue for you, Australian Department of Defence, to conduct a formal review of your position on UAP, because our brothers and sisters across the pond in the US are taking this topic very seriously and have said time and time again and reiterated time and time again that UAP pose a clear and present national security threat and safety of flight risk. Now, for you, Richard Marles, to say that there is no compelling or scientific reason for Australia in 2023 to take UAP seriously is a crock of shit, in my opinion. And you are just burying your head in the sand, as the Australian Department of Defence and RAF has done since 1996. Now, should there be a compelling reason? All right. Well, a question that I have for you, Richard Miles, is what does the Australian Department of Defence, or you as Minister for Defence, consider constitutes a compelling reason for the Australian Department of Defence to revisit its position, or I should say review its position on UAP? What do you consider to be a compelling reason? That is the question that I have, and I would like to get an answer on that one. So unfortunately, no, nothing that's really instills a whole lot of confidence with the petition. But remember, this is just the very first petition. There is nothing stopping you, my friends, to create and submit your own petition to the House of Representatives. And if it's UAP related in an Australian context, I'll be the first one to put my hand up and support your efforts and sign it. So feel free to submit a petition if it's important to you and if it's of interest. You can certainly do it. So let's move along. I want to now fast forward to following that petition response. I actually make sure I've got the right screen here. I'll go back to my my deck there for you. I tweeted, obviously, letting folks that follow me on social media, namely X, know that that response had been received from the Minister for Defence pertaining to that petition. And it was really nice to see wonderful gentleman by the name of Ted Rowe, who founded, I believe, is a founding member or is part of the UAP Medical Coalition. And he also is with the AIAA, which Ryan Graves is the chair of. Their outreach efforts, Ted Rowe looks after outreach at an international level and a national level on UAP. And so let me just pull up, I can find where this is. Here we go. Sorry, looking at the wrong thing. So it was nice to see Ted make these comments. He encourages Australian leaders, so those in positions of leadership, to reconsider the context or the response that came back to that petition. That basically, again, Richard Miles is saying, move along, folks. Nothing to see here. I encourage Australian leaders to reconsider. This is a proactive approach that is data-driven and open. I co-authored these recommendations, and they are under serious consideration by the US FAA, NASA, DoD, AARO for civil aviation UAP reporting. So you can have a look on my, I haven't got a link in the description below, but feel free, I'll put it in after this episode, but feel free to check my Twitter feed if you want to have a read of those recommendations that Ted Rowe and the AIAA made. I also tried to engage Dr. Gary Nolan. A little bit hard to see this tweet, but we know Dr. Gary Nolan heads up the Sol Foundation, which is all about helping national governments with respect to policy around UAP. And I've been very interested to learn more about their efforts and endeavors to engage governments on UAP, and because Australia needs a hell of a lot of help. And so I said, I hope this finds you well, Gary Nolan. While Australia and the US are the closest of allies, their positions on UAP couldn't be further apart. Case in point below from just today. The Australian government could sure use some TLC, 1011 care on UAP policy from the Sol Foundation right about now. Gary doesn't follow me on Twitter, so I didn't expect to receive a response, and I didn't. But if any of you out there do have a connection with Dr. Gary Nolan, a line of communication, I would encourage you to reiterate this point and ask the question. Australia really needs a lot of help on policy regarding UAP and taking it seriously. What does the Sol Foundation intend to do to help move the needle and help governments like Australia take this topic seriously and follow the lead of its Five Eyes partner and US AUKUS partner and US ally? So let's move away from we'll move on to a different topic now. I just found this an interesting one. There was a tweet from the Minister for Defence, Richard Marles, on the 15th of November. Great to speak with Chief Defence Scientist Tanya Monroe and Australia's leading scientists at the Australian Academy of Science Symposium. We discussed the importance of scientific research in addressing national security challenges. So I took the opportunity to quote tweet and ask Richard Marles, not that I'd ever expect to get a response on social media, and I never have, during your discussions with the head of Australia's Defence Science and Technology Group, DSTG, on the importance science plays in addressing national security challenges. Richard Marles, did you discuss the national security threats that unidentified anomalous phenomena UAP pose? Our US ally, Five Eyes and AUKUS partner, is continuing to take a scientific approach to better understanding and addressing the national security threats that UAP pose. What's Australia's excuse? And it's a fair comment, I believe, because Australia is just, again, burying its heels on the topic. So we now come, let's go to another, just make sure I've got this slide good to go here. I'll just pull it back up. Just a couple slides, folks. So I just found these articles to be of interest when they were shared on Twitter and so on. So Dr. Malcolm Davis, who is a really intelligent guy and a very well-respected senior analyst. He's with the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. He focuses on defence strategy and capability issues, including space policy and space security. He's been in the news recently. He often gets invited on, I think it was on CNN recently, Sunrise, some of the Brekkie Central shows, to comment on defence-related issues, whether it be pertaining to Ukraine or AUKUS with space policy, space security, and so on. So on the 29th of November, I noticed that Malcolm had posted on X, Space Force is going to start tracking abnormal objects, UAPs, in outer space. And I was like, that's interesting. This article, Task and Purpose. So let's have a read of, I thought I'll have a read of the article. I won't read the article in its entirety, but you can take a look at it at your leisure. There's a link in the description below. Let me see if I can just find where it is. I've got so many bloody tabs. Here we go. Is this the one? This is the one. Let me zoom on in so it's a bit easier on the eyes there. So Task and Purpose. I'm not familiar with this publication, but essentially the article published on the 25th of November, Space Force is going to track abnormal objects in outer space. I'll just read the first paragraph. As the military's youngest branch, US Space Force is still finding its footing. That includes everything from trying to get its uniforms right, work in progress, to laying out its specific doctrine on topics. This month, Space Training and Readiness Command, also known as the aptly named STARCOM, published a new bit of space doctrine, SDP 3-100, Space Domain Awareness, which the command called the first operational level doctrine publication developed by STARCOM for the US Space Force. The overall document is straightforward, explaining how Space Force plans to operate its own satellites and take into account other nations' spacecraft satellites, both national and commercial, and generally plan for what happens in orbit. But as the team at space.com noticed, buried in the wider document is a look at the unknown abnormal phenomena, which what the military calls UAPs and are more widely known as UFOs. So if you're not familiar with, just pull up the slide deck again for you. Oops, sorry, folks. Just pull it up for you again. There we go. So this was a tweet that a little bit hard to see, so I'll just read it for you. This was from US Space Command on the 29th of November. They were quote tweeting this space domain awareness document that had been tweeted by the Space Training and Readiness Command, STARCOM. So US Space Command, we'll talk about them in a second, quoted, space domain awareness capabilities are part of a broader resilient space architecture that enables command and control and provides the tools to sustain freedom of action in the space domain. Through SDA, US Spacecom can better protect and defend our vital space assets. So let's, what is that document? So let me just show you, and there's a link to that task and purpose article, which will link you to this document if you do want to have a read of it. But this is the document. I'll zoom out so it's a little easier on the eyes. So this is the document that the Space Force put out. And what is interesting is if I pull up the paragraph specifically on page 7, it reads, operating safely in the space domain requires the ability to detect, track, characterize, discriminate between, and maintain custody of increasingly smaller spacecraft and debris with increased accuracy. It requires the ability to detect, track, characterize, discriminate, and maintain custody of objects that are dimmer, more distant, or otherwise difficult to observe. Despite the increased proliferation of objects that are nearer and brighter, it requires the ability to rapidly identify and respond to these to threats and hazards, including objects that exhibit abnormal observables, 5 observables, and patterns of life, and cannot be correlated to any owner or point of origin. It also requires the ability to collect, transmit, store, and analyze an ever-increasing amount of observational data on tactically relevant timelines. So really interesting document. I had a quick skim through it. I want to go back through it and have a good read of it. But why is that important? Well, if we go back to our deck, I had responded to Malcolm Davis, following him posting that article with Task and Purpose. And I said, nice share, Malcolm. What are your thoughts on information sharing and or collaboration with Australian Space Command collaboration between Space Force and Australian Defence Space Command on UAP data collection? And his response, I was quite chuffed to read this. Grant, I keep an eye on your posts, read this topic. I think defence in Australia is very cautious on commenting on these things and on many defence issues in general. 100% agree. I wouldn't get your hopes up that they'll say anything of substance. The US seems to be a bit more open on this topic. Very true. So I responded to Malcolm. I said, copy that. A bit hard to see. Copy that. Many thanks, Malcolm. It's an interesting thought, though. It's an interesting thought given the current MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, on enhanced space cooperation between the US and Australia. So this was a document that I was able to secure through FOIA in Australia. I'll just make sure I got the right document. Which one is it? Here it is. So this is a Memorandum of Understanding concerning enhanced space operations between US Space Command and the Department of Defence Australia, as represented by Defence Space Command. So whilst there's really nothing of significant substance in this document, it kind of just talks about purpose and scope, areas of cooperation, exchange of information is interesting. And that's pretty much it. But it would be very interesting to consider, well, if now there's this memorandum of understanding for enhanced space cooperation between US Space Command, presumably that includes Space Force, and Defence Space Command, well, we now know that Space Force is now attempting to track UAP. So what information, if any, is going to be shared with Defence Space Command in Australia, and what information would Space Force like to see from Defence Space Command pertaining to UAP? It begs the question, is there going to be some data sharing on UAP? I would be very interested to follow that relationship between US Spacecom and Defence Space Command more closely over time. Now, what's happened only recently, and this is all kind of chronologically in order. So 5th of December, Defense Connect, which is kind of the equivalent of Defense Scoop in the US. They do a lot of reporting on what's happening with defense-related issues and initiatives in Australia. 5th of December, Deputy Prime Minister and Defense Minister Richard Marles has used a visit to the United States. So he was in the US only at the start of this month, his 6th trip in less than 2 years, to announce an expansion of Australia's deep space surveillance and space domain awareness capabilities, set to transform Exmouth in Western Australia. Well, that's pretty interesting, because if we look at the article that the ABC did on that capability, zoom on in. Probably a bit bigger there for me. So Exmouth reacts to news of expanded military AUKUS presence with US-led deep space facility. Residents of one of Western Australia's more prominent tourist towns have said they would welcome an expanded military presence in their backyard as a new high-tech radar facility takes shape. The ABC revealed late last week that the facility would be built near Exmouth under the AUKUS agreement to improve deep space object tracking as militaries across the world focus on future warfare involving satellites. Over the weekend, AUKUS defense ministers confirmed they were accelerating capabilities to identify emerging threats in space through a US-led deep space program that tracks objects in low Earth orbit, LEO. Now, I would be very interested to learn, if it's a US-led deep space program, if there's going to be any UAP tracking as part of your Space Force's efforts. Well, are they going to be leveraging these assets based in Australia to capture, to detect that data and to detect those objects? And if so, is that data going to be available to Defence Space Command and the Australian Department of Defence with a need to know? Interesting. I have no idea, but again, a story to keep a close eye on over time. Let me show you another thing that I noted only recently. That is our good friend, Air Vice Marshal Kath Roberts, the inaugural Defence Space Commander, has now officially handed over the reins of Command of Defence Space Command to Major General Greg Novak. They did this at a ceremony at Defence Space Command HQ in Canberra on the 13th of December. As inaugural commander, AVM Roberts set a strong foundation for Defence Space Command as a key part of the integrated force. Now, the most significant document that I've been able to secure for release through the Freedom of Information Act to date was a FOIA request that I submitted targeting Catherine Roberts. And what came back was the Chief of Air Force brief on UAP. So I would be very interested, even though Defence Space Command is no longer officially within the remit of the Royal Australian Air Force, it's now within the, help me out, Harry, it's the Joint Operations Command, I think it is. I can't remember, but it's now falling under a different command. And anyway, so we had Defence Space Command Australia tweet on the 14th of December, Defence Space Commander Major General Novak commences his new role today. After an extremely rewarding 2 years at 6th Brigade, there's nowhere in Defence I'd rather be than here in Defence Space Command. So you can bet your bottom dollar that I'll be keeping an eye on him and potentially submitting some FOIA requests that are UAP related on his leadership of Defence Space Command going forward. What else? They'll just show you the some of the information that was on the formal on the Australian Department of Defence website pertaining to the handover. Where is it? Here we go. Oops, going the wrong way. Oh no, too much. There we go. So new commander to shape space power. This is 13th of December. Just to kind of read the first couple paragraphs. Again, zoom in for you. Air Vice Marshal Kath Roberts officially handed over command to Major General Greg Novak this week, recognizing the wealth of experience he'll bring to the role, particularly in strategy, security, and deterrence. Major General Novak has extensive operational and space experience locally and overseas, commanding deployed forces and working with the United States Strategic Command in strategic deterrence space as an operational domain and integrated global operations, Air Vice Marshal Roberts said. As the ADF's first Defence Space Commander, Air Vice Marshal Roberts set the foundation for Defence Space Command, being part of the integrated force. The handover comes as the foundation stage of the Defence Space Strategy is completed and the evolve stage begins. So Defence Space Command is relatively young. It's only a couple of years old. Just want to see if there was a zinger in here, a quote I could pull up for you. There it is. Charlotte, the establishment of a command headquarters, one space surveillance unit as its first operational unit and a theatre joint force space component in headquarters, Joint Operations Command. So Defence Space Command falls now under Joint Operations Command. See if there's any other commentary. Defence Space Command is uniquely positioned to shape space power for the ADF's integrated force now and in the future. And I think that was pretty much. But anyway, that was. I found that just to be some interesting information pertaining to that handover and this new gentleman, Major General Novak, going forward. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on how he progresses as the new Defence Space Commander. What else has been going on as of late? And I know there's been some great comments come through. Logan Black, good to see you, my friend. Thank you so much for the generous donation. Great to see you. Logan does some really epic spaces on X. So if you're on X, feel free to give him a follow. I don't unfortunately have time to join a lot of the spaces live, but I do try and listen to the recordings of those that pique my interest. So do check out the good spaces that Logan moderates. He does some good work. All right, so let's have a look at what else has been happening close to home. I found this really fascinating. A wonderful researcher, UAP researcher by the name of Isaac Coy, has undertaken a huge project, this epic initiative where he basically, in this tweet, confirmed I uploaded 3,500 UFO newspaper clippings from Australia this weekend. This is on the 21st November, after using AI tools to collate and organize such clippings. Significantly, these tools can be adapted to collate plus share tens of thousands more clippings from dozens of countries. And I would certainly encourage you to give Isaac a follow on Twitter if you're interested to check out his project, his initiative. It gets the support of veteran Aussie researcher Keith Basterfield. Keith did a bit of a blog article on Isaac Coy's great research. More Australian UAP documentation being digitized thanks to Barry Greenwood and Isaac Coy. And I've put the link to Isaac's website in the description below. But if you're interested to check out his project, let me just pull it up here. This is Isaac's site. I'll just zoom on in again. Oops. There we go. So, thousands of Australian UFO news clippings downloaded, organized, and assimilated into a wider collection using AI-generated code. He gives a link to the database where 3,500 those 3,500 articles have been uploaded. I know Jimmy's going to get to work and want to suss all these out. So I rely on folks like Jimmy to share with me their findings, because I just, having a little one, I don't have the time to read through a lot of this great historical context. So, but yeah, it'd be really interesting to see what you guys find if you're interested to check it out. All right, so let's use that as an opportunity to move away from the rundown and just talk about some of the recent events that have been happening close to home. So we have, I found out on the 15th of November, I follow the Australian Space Agency on X, and they have, I believe it's a monthly webinar series called Ask the Space Expert. And there was a really, well-spoken and intelligent space expert that was being invited to speak on this webinar interview. Her name is Cavinda De Silva. She is she's aspiring to become the first Sri Lankan astronaut. She actually works in Australia for a company called Innovore Technologies, and they're a defense contractor. So just to kind of give you a sense as to who Innovore are all about. Innovore essentially, Innovore Technologies, a little bit hard to see. Let me zoom on in again. Innovore Technologies envisions a pivotal role for space innovation in the defense industry, with the growing recognition of space as a critical domain for defense operations and the need for advanced capabilities to ensure national security. Whether it's protecting our nation or exploiting the final frontier of space, our highly skilled local team of specialists design and build solutions and technology to get you over there. Our vision is to create exciting technology to improve and protect our way of life. And obviously they're on their team is Cavinda De Silva, who's the corporate affairs and PR officer. So she is obviously, well versed in the obviously space industry and defense space industry. So I was really interested to hear what she had to say during her Ask the Space Expert interview. And so I registered for it. And it was there weren't too many people attending the free webinar, but it was done over Teams, and it's a bit hard to read there. But I submitted a question. I was really keen to ask her, as an aspiring astronaut. I said, "Hi, Cavinda, as both NASA and the United States Department of Defense are taking a scientific approach to better understanding the nature and extent of unidentified anomalous phenomena (UAP), which is a global phenomenon, what are your thoughts on NASA's endeavors? And do you think a comparable scientific approach would be of value in an Australian context?" Now, unfortunately, the moderator didn't have a chance to ask my question in this session, even though I was one of the first questions to, I was one of the first cabs off the rank with a question. I strongly suspect he didn't want to ask my question, because I have not had much engagement with, or successful engagement with, the Australian Space Agency to date. When I asked them, their media team, what were their thoughts on NASA's UAP independent study team and their endeavors to better understand the nature and extent of UAP, and would the Australian Space Agency be willing to collaborate with NASA if called, if it received the call. And they basically said the Australian Space Agency is not in a position to comment on NASA's endeavors at present. Or I'm paraphrasing, but something to that effect. So the Australian Space Agency don't want to touch UAP either. And I was a bit frustrated that my question did not get asked during the interview. Really good interview. I enjoyed Cavinda's commentary. So, I thought, I didn't realize that she was on social media. So I thought, well, you know what, bugger it. I'm going to reach out to Cavinda on X. And I did exactly that. So on the 30th of November, I sent her a message. "Hi, Cavinda. I enjoyed watching your Ask the Space Expert online Q&A event hosted by the Australian Space Discovery Centre back on the 21st of November. as my question unfortunately wasn't asked, I hope you don't mind me asking you here. And then I asked the question. Also, I note you're one of several authors, and this is what I found really interesting in doing some homework on Govinda. Also, as I also note, you're one of several authors of the International Space University's 2020 final report titled Extraterrestrial Intelligence, The Search, the Science, and the Significance. I would very much love to get your thoughts. Many thanks in advance. And to my surprise and delight, well, actually, let me show you what the report looks like. Really interesting report, actually. I only have kind of skimmed through it relatively briefly, but I did find it to be quite interesting that Govinda, who has graduated from the International Space University and is an aspiring astronaut. Let me make sure I got the right. We're doing 16. I've got all my color codes here. There we go. So this is the report, and I think there was. I want to try to search for. Well, so you can see that if I come back to page 1, just so you can see. Whoops. So you can see that it was the International Space University Master of Space Studies program for 2020, and a list of authors. There she is, Govinda de Silva. Obviously, an email address is public available document, so that's probably an outdated email address now. But I found it quite interesting that I can't remember what I searched on. This was it. I found this interesting. Principle 5 deals with detection data, which could be made available in a database for analysis from other researchers. A possible idea could be to have an international storage system managed by the United Nations. Despite that, not having an international binding policy for post-detection activities, so this is once the revelation of NHI, leaves room for countries to classify data as top secret. There are 7 main factors that could bring governments to take such a decision. They've quoted Tough 1990. Panic between citizens, ontological shock, we've heard that time and time again, impact on culture, embarrassment due to the likelihood that the detected signal could be a hoax. The WOW signal, I know, is being questioned by many, but there seems to be a lot that also think it might be legitimate. A human satellite coded message or another phenomena not well understood. Competition between countries, the right to be the first to reply, some military advantages that they could take from the signal, the hazard that it could be a Trojan horse. And I found that to be interesting. So we've heard, anyone that has followed this topic for a while knows what a Trojan horse is. So I just found it to be an interesting document that she was one of the co-authors on. So I decided to reach out to Govinda, obviously, with that question. And to my surprise and delight, she responded. Hi, Grant. From a science communication perspective, NASA's and the US commitment to exploring the natural world and the global phenomenon of IAEA, and I can't remember what the acronym is for that. So let me just pull it up. It is the International Atomic Energy Agency. I'll just read what it is. It's an intergovernmental organization that seeks to promote the peaceful use of nuclear energy and to inhibit its use for any military purpose, including nuclear weapons. So I wasn't quite entirely sure what the reference was there to. The IAEA aligns with Australia's pursuit of advancing scientific knowledge for the betterment of humanity. She goes on in a part 2 of the tweet. In an Australian context, a collaborative effort in exploring topics like these, so undertaking data-driven assessments to understand the nature and extent of UAP, like these or similar, would be more beneficial to us given that we can pool expertise, share resources, and collectively address the challenges posed by IAEA. The report that she co-authored was an interesting team project where we learnt the behind-the-scenes of projects like SETI, the funding aspect, the community outreach, and public engagement, etc. Also, not to forget the importance of such organizations and initiatives. So I was really quite impressed to see this this level of serious tone taken by someone that is working within the defense, the space industry in Australia. Obviously, Innovora has got a number of defense space contracts. Kavinda is aspiring to be Sri Lanka's first astronaut, so I wish her the best of luck and success with her endeavors, and appreciate the the candor and response that she gave me with respect to my query on UAP. Let's now just move it along. It's now from a while back, but just wanted to hit home that the team that was behind organising Ross Coulthart's Sydney Q&A event in October has recently made that their recording available on their website. There is a link in the description below. I attended both the Melbourne event, as did Jimmy, and I know a few others. It was a really, really fascinating event. And the Sydney one was just as fascinating, very different kind of commentary. So it was an interesting session. And so feel free to watch that if you're interested to have a look at what Ross had to talk about. There are really three key takeaways from for me from that event, and I don't want to obviously spoil the commentary and the good work that the Close Encounters Australia team did to document the event. But in the context of what we're kind of talking about today, I found Ross's commentary during Q&A to be particularly interesting. So let me play it for you.
A guy contacted me who was an F-35 pilot inside the Australian Air Force. And I'm probably revealing that he's one of, a couple of dozen guys in that conversation. But he wanted me to know that he'd seen anomalous phenomena. And I said to him, will you report this to your bosses? Because they're saying that they've got no evidence. And he said, what do you think? What do you think somebody like me should do when the head of my Air Force is telling a parliamentary committee that there is no evidence? He said, I'm getting the message that I shouldn't come forward with that evidence. This is the problem, is that there needs to be a free, open, transparent, unpressurized airing of this evidence, because there are so many people out there who want to provide evidence who feel intimidated about doing so.
Now that right there is what I would say is also a huge potential national security threat. If you have folks that are flying F-35s and are seeing UAP or things that are anomalous to them, they can't reconcile them in the skies, and they're fearful to report it because they know that the Chief of Air Force is not taking UAP seriously. The RAF certainly isn't. There are no reporting protocols currently in place. And Ross has said on previous occasions that folks are fearful to come forward and report UAP to their higher ups out of fear of stigma and ridicule and having a blemish placed against their flight record. So, whilst I appreciate the reasons why you've got folks like Ross was talking about there, those F-35 pilots that aren't coming forward and revealing what they've seen, that in itself is a huge issue. That is a potential national security threat. If there is something in Australian airspace that F-35 pilots cannot identify that could be a true UAP that exhibits one or more of the 5 observables, well, what if it's not a UAP? What if it is a foreign adversary? We know China is surveilling the living shit out of Australia. They're surveilling Pine Gap, flying satellites over like there's no tomorrow. We know that Chinese military vessels have kind of come close to the coast of northwestern Australia in years past. So we know that China is taking a very keen interest on Australia's capabilities, vulnerabilities, and so on. So if a UAP is a foreign adversary, and you've got folks that aren't reporting that, that is huge. That's a massive problem. So regardless of whether a UAP is something prosaic or something potentially exotic, I think it needs to be reported because of the potential national security threats and flight risks that UAP pose. I found this to be another bit of commentary from Ross that was rather pertinent in terms of what you can do to, if you want to help advance the conversation, elevate the conversation on the UAP topic.
For anybody who's interested in this area is to let your political representatives know you're interested in this subject. It's that simple. I've had this conversation with people in Congress because there are senators and congressional representatives who do not believe the American public are interested enough in this to put their necks out and publicly make a statement about it. And I'm talking to congressional representatives who are actually intellectually engaged with this subject matter, but they're nervous. They're worried about the stigma and the taboo that's attached to the subject of UAPs. And for them, I mean, there was a political candidate once for the presidency who was destroyed because he admitted he'd seen a UFO. This huge, you saw what happened with Chris Christie the other day, the presidential candidate. He got asked a UFO question and his response was to ridicule the question. What's interesting is that people like Vivek Ramaswamy, the presidential candidate, have actually said that they do think that this should be investigated. He's shown a very pleasant willingness to engage intellectually with the subject matter. That's what you can do. Just the simple fact of actually keeping this in the forefront of public attention, writing letters to your editor. So when somebody takes the piss with the subject of UAPs, ask them why. Why? When the US admits it's a reality. This is the difficulty for the debunkers and the trolls now, is that we've moved into a new era. This is a new paradigm. We're beyond the stigma and the taboo. It's a reality. What's needed now is for the public, you guys, to push and say, yeah, I'm interested in this subject matter. I want to know more, and I'm not happy. In Australia, our Defence Department is officially saying it's not investigating UAPs, it's not monitoring them, it's not interested, and yet I've got pilots and other personnel telling me they're seeing these things and they're frightened about coming forward. And who can blame them? So the best way you can help is by basically making it clear that this is a subject that interests you. And gosh, if ever there was a representation of the fact that this is a subject that interests people, it's the fact that we've filled a hall on a beautiful Saturday afternoon when we'll all be at home working in the garden.
So there you go. So if this topic is important to you and you want your elected representatives to take it seriously, I would certainly encourage you to reach out per Ross's recommendation there. Last couple of things I just want to share with you that I found interesting. Recently, let me just pull this back up. Recently, Chris Bledsoe was on the Danny Jones podcast, and I watched it's actually a really fascinating interview. It's he's very emotional and emotive in how he recounts his stories and shares his recollections. I was just interested to hear what he had to say, and the reason for that is because, well, I'll play the clip so you can kind of get a sense for yourself.
Thing is, Danny, is I went from totally quitting and announcing it to the heavens, I'm never going to do this again, to a new, renewed energy of now what am I going to do? If I tell this about the lady, they're going to come lock me up. They're going to think I'm crazy for sure. Mm-hmm. So I didn't say anything for a while. And 2 weeks later, a week later, I had vowed not to ever speak about it again. 1 week later, I get a call from MUFON saying, we want you to talk in Asheville, North Carolina, which is 6 hours away. And I readily accepted, yeah, I want to talk. So I was a different attitude towards it. And that's where I met Diana Pasulka 2 weeks after the lady came. And I started talking about the lady in that conference, and the audience began to heckle me. They made fun. They didn't want to hear about the lady. They wanted to hear about the river event. So it was a very traumatic thing, and that bonded Diana and I for all these years to where that's how we became to know one another. But the crazy thing is immediately when she left, that's when I began to document everything. I could get pictures. I could take you out and share it with you. Only after she came.
Only after the lady came.
Yep.
What do you think the bull symbolized?
I don't know, but I know this. It got the attention of Diana and the Vatican and CIA, NASA, and everybody. DOD, even the Ministry of Defense in Britain, Australia, all these people. They wanted to know about the lady immediately, let me tell you. In fact, I put it in writing to 2 generals at the Pentagon what she told me. I was asked to do that.
So I found that to be a fascinating revelation, that Chris Bledsoe is making a claim that, the Australian Department of Defense, representative from the Australian Department of Defense, had engaged Chris Bledsoe to learn about his experiences, his encounters with UAP and such forth. And this isn't the first time that Chris Bledsoe has stated that claim. He's actually mentioned it before, and after I saw that interview, I decided to send a tweet out to, Chris Bledsoe doesn't have an X account. He's only on Instagram, but his son, Ryan Bledsoe of the Bledsoe Said So podcast, I reached out and said, the Australian Department of Defence has shown no interest publicly in unidentified anomalous phenomena since 1996. I continue to be intrigued by Chris Bledsoe's claim that AUDOD engaged him after his encounter with the lady and expressed an interest in his experiences with the OP. Ryan Bledsoe, while I recognize you have not been responsive to previous requests, would your father now be better positioned and prepared to share additional details of his engagement with AUDOD? And again, this isn't the first time that he's made this claim. Earlier this year, on the 14th of March, Chris Bledsoe appeared on That UFO podcast with Andy McGrillen, and he stated the same. He made the same claim. So I did the same thing back then. I reached out. Hi, Ryan Bledsoe. I'd like to follow up on your father's engagement with the Australian Department of Defence per clip below, as they've publicly shown no interest in the UFO topic, UAP topic since 1996. Could you kindly confirm who at AUDOD engaged your father and when? Now, I've never received any responses to Ryan Bledsoe or my outreach to Chris Bledsoe to date. Why, if the goal is to advance the conversation and further disclosure, wouldn't that be information that would be of interest to folks like myself in Australia, to promote transparency and we try and push the needle along? So I never received any responses from Ryan Bledsoe or Chris Bledsoe. But in that interview, Chris Bledsoe's daughter was alongside him, and she, at the end of the interview, she noted that how people could contact her. Her name's Emily Holloway. She's a singer, an actress, a pianist, and a teacher. And this is her website, so it's publicly available information. She had an email address, so I decided to reach out to her and see if she would be in a position to ask her father, Chris Bledsoe, for details about his claims of engagement with the Australian Department of Defence. So I sent an email to Emily on the 6th of December asking that very question. Now, I haven't received any response to date. I don't suspect that I will, but when someone makes a claim that has anything to do with UAP in Australia, my ears perk up, and I'm very, very keen to try and verify the veracity of that claim. I haven't had any luck with Chris Bledsoe, sadly, on his claim to date. Last thing I'll leave you with, because I know we've been going for a very, very long time. The graphic's a little bit small on the screen, so my apologies for the small size. But gentleman by the name of UAP Max, Steve Sprague, I think his name is. He has a podcast called the Dear People podcast, and thanks to Steve and for allowing me to play this clip. He had Stephen Bassett on his podcast recently, and I joined that podcast live. I've been following the work of Stephen Bassett and the advocacy and activism that he's kind of been leading the charge on with engaging folks in government in the United States, and wanted to ask him a question about his thoughts on the Five Eyes lack of engagement on the UAP topic to date. So these were his comments.
Oh, Steve, Grant. Hi, Steve. Given the U.S. and AU are the closest of all allies, but couldn't be further apart on UAP, AU is completely disengaged. Do you see the Five Eyes taking more of an active interest in 2020? Well, yeah. Look, the reason that Canada, Australia, and a lesser degree the UK, but also the UK, are, quote, disengaged, is because these are our closest allies. Okay, who doesn't love an Aussie? I'm really fond of the UK, and I love Canada. Okay, so who doesn't? You know, there are allies, and we are running the truth embargo. We are leading the truth embargo. We are the nations that protect them from Soviet or Russian nuclear submarines. I know. I don't think Australia has a nuclear sub, but I think UK does and got a few weapons. But I assure you, it's not the UK or Canada that's going to save us. And so they have stayed disengaged because that is what they consider appropriate. They don't want to be out there rattling our cage or creating problems for us as we try to service the Cold War, and then the continuing nuclear arms race, and then Cold War II, and all the other crises going on. And I get that. So I wouldn't get mad at them, but I wouldn't underestimate just how active they will get the day after disclosure. I assure you, it will not take Trudeau or Sunak or whoever the hell is running Australia to be on board. Boom, just like that, and the fun begins.
So there you go. So Stephen Bassett is of the opinion that, you know, Australia is kind of standing, waiting by, watching from afar, if disclosure, or as Bryce Abel likes to frame it as confirmation, happens. You would hope that Australia would take the baton that's been passed to them and then jump into the ring and start taking this topic seriously. It's just frustrating that Australia is not at least publicly showing any interest or appetite for the topic whatsoever, particularly when our US ally is looking at it as a clear threat to national security and safety of flight. And that's the angle that I've always pursued UAP on in an Australian context. I think that's the only way that the Australian government is going to take the topic seriously, if it's positioned as a national security threat and safety of flight risk, which it is. I don't think the Australian government is even in a position or a place at the moment to entertain David Grusch's claims of there being these crash retrieval programs or NHI being, biologics being recovered, when it hasn't even acknowledged that UAP is a thing, that a conversation needs to be had on UAP. So the pursuit, the quest continues to try and get Australia engaged on the topic. The last thing I'll leave you with, folks, before I come to a couple of comments, is I promoted this not too long ago. Westall 66, the musical. There was a recording done of it, and it's now available for you to watch, not watch, but listen to on Spotify. So I was unable to attend the world premiere, a school production of the Westall incident, called Westall 66, the musical. The link is in the description below. I'm going to try and listen to it when I have some downtime. I heard from folks that had an opportunity to attend the event, and they said it was absolutely wonderful. Even got a shout out in Victorian Parliament. The member for the area where the school is located that put on this production. He was the local member for it, and he gave it a really good rap in Victorian Parliament. So first time that Westall ever been discussed, regardless of being in kind of informal discussion in Victorian Parliament. So feel free to have a look at the link in the description below if you want to listen to Westall 66, the musical. That's everything I wanted to cover off on with you folks. I know this has been a really long episode, and it's always hard for me to anticipate how long these sessions are going to go. So I do want to acknowledge some of the folks in the chat that have come out with some really good comments and questions. They're a little bit earlier from the live stream, so I'll just call them up as we go through. Let's see. Harry's comments. Bill, I presume that's referring to Bill Chalker. Bill's got a good blog about the question he asked and the response. I'll see if I can find the link. I'm assuming that's Bill Chalker he's referring to there. If it is, Chili Farm Brisbane indicate he's a good bloke. Yes, but Bill's a great guy. I've had the pleasure of picking Bill's brain for many hours over dinner after the Ross Coulthart Sydney Q&A event. So very, very intelligent guy and just a wonderful, wonderful bloke, along with Keith Basterfield, both bloody legends in the topic of UAP in Australian context. Thank you, J Mac, for your support and your comments. Find the power, my man. Love your work, Grant. Appreciate your kind words. Short order cook. I'm waiting to see what Soul is about. I would like to see them walk their talk first. Yeah, we're still waiting for the recordings to be made available. I know that it was recorded, and Gary Nolan has indicated that it was recorded, will be made publicly available. I think there've been a couple of delays in getting the recordings edited. Maybe there's just some logistical things going on there. So hopefully we'll get to see them soon, though. Harry's comments. Notice how Penny Wong is always the one answering questions for defense in Senate estimates. I think they are scared that Miles will burst into tears if hard questions get asked. Funny that Richard Miles, Minister of Defense, has never appeared in public at a Senate estimates to answer questions on behalf of defense under his leadership. It's always fallen on to someone else. And you recall Senator Penny Wong was the one that ridiculed Senator Whish-Wilson's question. Said, "Is this a UFO? Is that a UFO question?" Just the ignorance is just so frustrating, and it really gets under the skin. Short order cook one. Whatever happened then also to the treaties Australia has signed for space? I think the Artemis Accords. I think you might refer to. That's one of them. There's a few of them. I feel when it's all in the hands of defense, there's always a risk of war or unsettlement. Yeah, that's a good call. Let's have a look at some of the other comments that have come through. Shorter cook, that's an over-the-horizon radar array. Sounds more like a target. That was probably regarding to an earlier comment. Sometimes it's hard to get the context for these comments as we go through. 12 CM32. Well done, Isaac. Agreed. Yeah, check out Isaac's work. He's obviously spent a lot of hours putting that together. So feel free to have a look if it interests you. Let's have a look at some of the other comments that have come through. Erin comments, Kavinda De Silva seems like a really smart and fun person. I would agree. Yeah, very, very personable, very down to earth, very grounded. And she offered some recommendations for some students that are in the webinar, the Q&A event on what they can do if they're interested in pursuing a career in space or in the space industry and so on. So yeah, I've got a lot of time for Kavinda De Silva and hope she does reach her goal of becoming Sri Lanka's first astronaut. That would be very cool. Roger, thank you so much for joining, my friend. If you're still here, great to see you. Thanks, Grant. Brilliant, detailed work on your behalf. Thank you for your support, my friend, as always. Jasmine, that's so cool. Short or how long? Oh, that was probably relating to an earlier comment. Apologies, I don't have the context there. Thank you, Jimmy, for your kind words as always. This episode has been very well put together, Grant. It's always a bit of a lift trying to put all the content together, because I put together a little slide deck, and I just kind of curate the content over the course of really the month, and then just put it all together. Have a couple late nights to put it into a deck, into a kind of a sequential order that's easy for me to just. A lot of the stuff's ad-libbed. I just talk about it as I go through. I'm with you, Jimmy. I'm a bit unsure on Bledsoe. I don't doubt that he's a very genuine person and wonderful person, but I'm just a little dubious on some of the claims that he's made, particularly the fact that it's challenging to verify the claims that he's made. For me personally, those that pertain to his engagement with AUDOD. Follow-up comment from Drew. However, it has got me thinking now. My eyesight's too bad. However, it has got me thinking now, after hearing that Diana is close to Bledsoe, and possibly the Grey Man, who's an Australian, may have visited or had correspondence with him, Bledsoe. Yeah, it would be. It's a frustration, and also fascinating that Diana Pasulka puts all these characters in her books that have these pseudonyms, and the Grey Man is one that has piqued a interest for a lot of us, because it is alleged that the individual is Australian. So I wonder if we'll ever find out the identity. Let's see if there's some other comments that have come through. It's very true. Short order cook one. Aussies will turn anything into a musical. It's true. If they've done Westall, what will they do next? Maybe they'll do one on basically this whole saga. The Senate Estimate saga. There was a great musical years ago. I saw it at the Sydney Opera House called Keating, about Paul Keating. Maybe they'll do a musical about Senator Penny Wong and the Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Mel Hupfield and Robert Chipman, on their complete lack of interest on the UAP topic, and hopefully get to a point where Australia takes it seriously. There's a good suggestion. Aaron, can we have Pine Gap, the musical? We have to try and figure out some information about Pine Gap first. Very hard to get some information on what even is done at Pine Gap. So, well, there are all the comments, folks. Look, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your evening, your morning, wherever you are on this blue marble of ours. Thank you for joining me again for another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. Feel free to subscribe to the channel if you're new, if you value the content. It goes a long way. Consider sharing it with your friends, family, colleagues, social network. Give it a like if you found the content of interest, and consider joining, becoming a YouTube member or a Patreon member if you want to make a contribution above and beyond just a like, share, subscribe. So thank you once again, all. Look forward to having you join me again on another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye for now.
If you have enjoyed this episode of the Unexplained Rundown, please consider giving it a thumbs up, sharing with your friends, family, colleagues, and social network, as well as subscribing to the channel. And if you'd like to be notified whenever the Unexplained Rundown goes live, premieres, or posts a new video, be sure to ring that cowbell.
Bye for now, folks. All the best.